Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to look at Unit 0.3. Claim development is where we're going to start today. What we're going to do today. We're going to begin with our fives, basic map expectations for the course, and then we'll do some skill practice. We're going to go over some answers for the sourcing from yesterday, and then we'll start doing some claim development here. Right? All right, so we'll start every day with these five. So we'll start every day with some questions. So go ahead and pause, and then come back when you're ready. All right, so correct answer, hopefully you got was 2. Go ahead and pause. Hopefully the correct answer you got was 3. Feel free to pause. And this is something that we had discussed yesterday, so this should have been an easy one for you. 2, cultural diffusion. Go ahead and pause. All right, so once again, we discussed this one yesterday. So 4. And come back when you're done. All right, so this one we actually did spend a moment on. Because I know some of my students have taken AP Human Geography, and I know some are coming in without having taken that course. There is a distinct advantage to have to come into this class having already taken that as a prerequisite, but it is not an actual prerequisite. But if you had taken that course, you do deal a lot with human-environment interaction, which is one of our course themes, and you also dealt with things like demographics, which is what you're seeing here in the Industrial Revolution, which if you saw these dates and you knew about the Industrial Revolution, then that would have given you 3 as the correct answer. So there's that. All right. Just a reminder, tomorrow is your summer assignment test. So skill words. Right, skill words, make sure you know those and can recognize them when they're being applied. Make sure you're familiar with your regions of the world map, and make sure you're familiar with the cities. So, like, for example, you might be asked questions like, what number is North America, right? Or you may also be asked questions like, what number is the city of Beijing in, right? Or what number is the city of Delhi in. So make sure you're familiar with these and able to identify which region of the world these are in. So once again, here's a list from the summer assignment. Right, so make sure you're able to do so. I did provide these maps, not because of the regions or the kingdoms that are on here, but because of the city locations that are identified for you. So Mombasa, Calcutta, okay, Baghdad, Malacca, etc., etc. And these are the later ones, which you are responsible for the test. All right, so sourcing. So we'd gone over this in class yesterday. Student responses were given, and I did give in class today a couple of just kind of some rules for sourcing, right? Some ideas for sourcing. And I guess I wasn't going to do notes, but I wasn't set up for notes, but let me go ahead and give you some notes on this because I do give notes in class on this. So bear with me. I'm gonna get this set up. It should just take me a second. And there we go. And we're live. I'm gonna move. Yep, that's good. That's viewable for you. All right. Let's make this a little larger. All right, and so as far as sourcing is concerned, so we have our document. Something to actually write on now. And of course, I don't have any paper on me at all. I do apologize. Let me grab a piece of paper. I'll be right back. All right. So when you're sourcing, what I say about this in class, right? When you're sourcing documents, there are some do's, right, and then there are some do nots, right? So, right, there's some do's, and then there are some do nots. So let's start with the easy ones. Which are the do nots? Do not summarize. All right, do not summarize the document that you're being presented. Okay, it is not what sourcing is about. Do not give the main idea. Okay, don't tell me what the main idea of the document is. Do not reword or quote the document. Okay, that's not what you're being asked to do. All right, what you are being asked to do, right? The do's here is bring knowledge that helps understand or get a better understanding of the document. Okay, do that. Also, you have to do risk being wrong in order to be correct. Right? You can't sit on the fence. Right? So when you're doing your sourcing, right, your HIPP or whatever acronym you want, right? Just as a reminder, this is right, historical context, document specific, right? So small c, the quote should be there, right? Small c contextualization. And by small c, you really mean, what does that really mean? Document specific, right? Small c contextualization. Intended audience, purpose, and then point of view or limitations. All right, so when you're sourcing, okay, you're gonna be sourcing for for one of these things, and I always kind of like to say in class, like when you are doing this, really 2 sentences should be enough, right? In the first sentence, you're gonna kind of select a method of sourcing, right? So select a method, maybe to source, right? So HIPP, right? So like choose one, okay? Choose one way to source. And then after you've done that, after you kind of explain that, give a so what statement. And that so what statement, it might bleed into another one of those sourcing techniques. Okay, it just might. All right, so let me kind of give you let me give you an example of this. All right. So if I'm looking at this document right now, if you say something like, Benjamin Harrison created a holiday in order for people to know about Columbus Day, then that's not sourcing, right? You're just kind of summarizing. All right, so what do you need to do? So let me give you a couple of examples of how you could source this document. All right, so one way you could source this document is by contextualizing. So let's do DH. Let's do some small c contextualization. An example of small c contextualization would be, how would I word that? I would word it to the effect of, the 1880s and early 1890s saw a large influx of Italian immigrants into the United States. Okay, so there's I am contextualizing. I'm telling you what is going on in the United States at the time in which this speech was given. There is nothing from what I just said that is in this document, so I am bringing in outside knowledge. So now I need to kind of give the so what statement. I need to connect it back. I need to connect what I just said back to something that is in the document here. All right, so I would say something to the effect of 1892 being an election year. Okay, so I've already connected it to the document here. 1892 being an election year, the president may hope that celebrating a famous Italian will contribute or help him be reelected. All right, so that is, I've now connected it directly now, not just to the source tag, but also to the topic that the passage is about, Christopher Columbus. All right, so in order to do sourcing like that, right, first off, you need to know that Columbus is Italian. It is surprising how many of my students think that he is Spanish. I understand why you'd think that, but you need to know that he's Genoese, right? He's from Genoa, which in after the mid 1800s makes him Italian. All right, and so you need to know that, I guess, initially, and then you need to kind of connect the dots to immigration going on in the United States. All right. Another way you could, I guess that's probably good enough. You get the idea, right? In class, I source it for point of view as well. All right. All right. Now, let me give you a different example. And I may have talked about this in class or on the video yesterday. Some classes I went over this yesterday, some I didn't. But I did go over this in class today. So let me give you a couple of different ways to source, this, just as a way to kind of teach how to source. So if you had to source a document from a month or two ago, here's an example of a document from a month or two ago. So we have here New York Times, Biden signs law making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Right, law went immediately into effect on Friday for the first federal Juneteenth holiday. Right, so as far as sourcing tag, I just kind of threw this together. So it would be June 19th. It was published on June 17th, 2021. All right, so this is from a couple of months ago now. So if I would ask you to source this, right, if I were asking you to source this document, kind of think to yourself, let me kind of throw that up there. Could you source that document? Let me just kind of move this a little bit. Could you source this document for historical context? Could you tell me something going on in the United States in the year 2020, 2021 that may have contributed to the creation of Juneteenth as a federal holiday? All right, so first off, you got to know what Juneteenth is, all right, in order to do that. And then you have to know what what was going on in the United States. Right? So I assume you could do that. So if you could explain that by using information beyond what you are seeing in this document, which is not very much, then that would be contextualizing. All right, let me go through the next one. Could you tell me who you think the intended audience is for a speech given by President Biden regarding the Juneteenth holiday? Right? Could you describe that and explain that? All right. Could you tell me the purpose of the creation of the Juneteenth holiday? And could you do that using information that is not provided in that document? All right. Could you give me point of view? And just as far as point of view is concerned, if I were sourcing the New York Times for point of view here, let me just say this. When I Googled Juneteenth, because I wanted to use a modern holiday, right, a more recent holiday that had been created, I was very happy to find the New York Times. because it's the same source that we'd use on the other one. So when I clicked onto it, I was a little surprised because I was able to access the entire article for Juneteenth for this article. As somebody who I do not have a subscription or web-based subscription to the New York Times. So the number of articles that I can click into as a teacher for free from the New York Times I have rarely been able to do so, basically since they created their paywall back in whatever that was, 2002 or something like that. It used to be just register for free with their email, then they put a paywall on about in 2002 or so, give or take a few years. Right, so almost nothing is behind the paywall, right? Or almost nothing is not behind the paywall of the New York Times. This one is free for the reading. So if you wanted to do point of view, maybe you could use that as a way. So when we talk about sourcing, right? When we're talking about sourcing, if you can do that for that Biden Juneteenth New York Times article, it's because you know the historical context, because you're living in it. You know the audience because you're familiar with the topic. You know the purpose. You know the limitations. Or maybe you can at least do one of these really well. Okay? The only difference between that Juneteenth article and that Benjamin Harris one is 130 years. Right? That's the only difference. So you need to be able to approach these documents like you do that Juneteenth one. It means you need to understand enough about history, right? Enough about history in order to provide some context that is relevant to the document that is not in the document, right? Or audience or purpose or point of view. And how do you do that? You do that through reading. You do that through the lectures, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So in class, we went over that, and then we went over a visual sourcing a visual item. All right. So doing a visual analysis. We do sourcing on the DBQ. It's part of the DBQ rubric. When you do your DBQ essays, you're going to be given 7 different documents. 6 of those 7 documents are going to be passages. Or I should say 5 to 6 are going to be passages. And 1 will be an image, maybe 2, but usually it's 1 is going to be an image. It could be a photograph. It could be a piece of art. It could be a graph. It could be, a whole host of things, right? It could be a map, right? So in my opinion, visual analysis is a little trickier to earn the sourcing point. And the reason I say that is because by the time you start doing these things, you're usually pretty good at bringing in the outside information. What you're not really good at is taking that outside information and applying it to what you're seeing here in this image. Okay, so if you're going to do a visual source, this is these are some suggested tricks from the College Board in order to earn the sourcing point. So overview, so when you see an image, provide an overview, give a little description of what you're seeing there. List everything you can see in the picture, break down the picture, list it off as much detail as you can. Maybe create a title for it, right? It's kind of like giving a main idea for it. Okay, now that you've identified different parts, can you identify an interrelationship between 2 or 3 of those things, right? And then conclusion, now that you've looked at it, can you come up with a fact that about what you're looking at that is not in that image? Right? Can you bring in outside information? So if you're doing this at home, please pause and just kind of brainstorm this and think about it, and then come back when you're done. All right, so now that you've gone through, you've answered these questions, let's go over some possible answers. Right, so hopefully you were able to identify that this is a statue of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Hopefully you probably identified the fact that when I do this in class, students are pretty quick to identify that he's wearing a preacher's robe. His hands outstretched. Looks like he's giving a sermon. On the pedestal, it looks like children. Right. So as far as the interrelationship, most students in class, they make that relationship, that interrelationship between him preaching and him wearing the robe. Like it looks like it belongs together. Okay, so now the question becomes, right? When you know, the issue that I think most students have when they're sourcing this kind of stuff is they will talk about they'll look at this image and then they will try to source it by talking about Dr. Martin Luther King's, you know, his involvement in the civil rights movement and in nonviolence. What they won't do is then connect that back to the document that you're talking about. Thus, you know, something to the effect of that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is being portrayed, you know, wearing his preacher robe and giving a sermon, you know, and this influenced his nonviolence, you know, or this influenced the way that he approached the civil rights movement, you know, and informed his belief in nonviolence, right? Or you could also connect this thing to, like, you know, how Dr. King was influenced by Gandhi. You know, Gandhi was often seen wearing traditional Hindu robes and Hindu clothing. Gandhi was influenced by the Hindu concept of ahimsa, right? So just let me pop that up there because I threw that up on the board in class. You know, we talk about Gandhi, A-H-I-M-S-A, okay? Gandhi was, you know, Gandhi practiced nonviolent civil disobedience and preached ahimsa, right? So, which is the concept of nonviolence within Hinduism. So both Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were informed through their religious beliefs. They're both often portrayed wearing religious clothing as well. Right? So that's the way you could source a visual item. All right, so to change gears, you know, we're going to do a little claim development now, kind of just intro to claim development, you know, kind of very basic stuff today. All right, so here we go. All right, so two things you got to do to be successful, especially when you're talking about the essay rubrics. One is you have to develop or be able to develop a historically defendable claim or assertion. All right, come up with categories of analysis. I use these words interchangeable. Once you've done that, and let me just kind of throw this on here really quick. Right, and once you've done that, you need to be able to support and establish your claim, your assertion with evidence. All right, where's my Elmo gone? Did I close that thing down? Say it isn't so. Yes, I must have closed it. All right, let me open that up again. Hold on. So there's a couple more notes I do want to give. Sorry, I'm really out of practice with this stuff. I gotta get better. All right. There you are, coming back to life again. Oh, that's not gonna work. All right. All right, here we go. All right, so claim development, assertions, and such. All right, so claim. All right, so when I say the word claim, I mean the word assertion. I mean the word thesis. I mean the concept of a category of analysis. Okay, I use them all interchangeably, you know, as we go through this year. All right, so what do we have here? It must, right, when you're talking about a thesis, right, it must be defendable. Right, not a fact. Okay, and I guess what I really mean by that is one must be able to argue against. All right, one must be able to argue against it. Okay, so I can't just, you know, I can't just come out and say that this bottle is blue. Okay, that's not something you can argue against. All right, so You have to make a historically defendable assertion or statement, right? That has to be supported with evidence that one could argue against. Okay. All right. So that being said, let's kind of dive into this, and let's start with a really easy example. So here's your first prompt. Develop an argument that evaluates whether a hot dog is a sandwich. Right? Develop an argument that evaluates whether a hot dog is a sandwich. Okay. So stop, think about it. Come up with an assertion that is not a fact, that has to be defended with evidence, and that one could argue against. Okay? All right, so go ahead and pause, and this could take anywhere from a minute to 10 minutes. So go ahead and do that. Feel free to bring this up with people at home. All right. So hopefully you've thought about this. Welcome back, and you have some responses. Some of the more interesting ones that have come up in class, ones that I really like, and that I find to be compelling. One is this concept that a sandwich, in order for something to be categorized as a sandwich, it has to be common to cut it in half before you eat it. Okay, so you would never cut a hot dog in half before you eat it. Thus it is not. One of the ones that I've never heard before today, which I found pretty compelling, was the palm up, palm down assertion. Okay, that sandwiches are eaten being held with the palm down. So if you eat it traditionally with a palm up, then it cannot be categorized as a sandwich. I've never heard the palm up, palm down. So I like these ones because they are really good examples of assertions, that have to be defended, and I can argue against it. Like, for example, I would argue against the palm down one because if I pick up a burrito to eat it, then I would eat that palm down. In which then contradicts that assertion. All right, so but you can definitely make plenty of arguments for it. All right, so those are a couple of examples of assertions. So the question now becomes: is now that you have your assertion, so I didn't say those in order for you to not have yours or to reject yours or anything. So hopefully you still have yours. Let's go through some evidence and let's see if the evidence supports or contradicts it. So. I'm not going to read through all these with you. You're welcome to pause and read through these, and just to see if they support your assertion or if they contradict your assertion. I was kind of like this one. I lived in New York for 8 years, and New York will find a way to tax and to get their tax revenues in, right? So, right, based on your definition, right, based on your assertion, would a hot dog be taxed in the state of New York? All right. Does that match up with what this says? All right. What do you think? A couple of others. All right. Image, in case you've never seen it. All right, I'm going to move on. Moving on. If you want the opinion of a current Supreme Court justice, right? This is Justice Sotomayor. And this is from an AP World History student who wrote a letter to the Vienna Beef Company, right? So wrote a letter, and then got the following response. Quite amazing initiative. All right. This is from a poll, opinion poll. All right, so most Americans do not believe a hot dog is a sandwich. But not a sandwich. 61% of Americans. Okay. It is kind of interesting, the age and kind of geographic demographic breakdown on this. All right. How about this? Does the shape of the hot dog or the appearance of the hot dog change? All right. Change how you look at it. Is that a hot dog? So this is from QVC, right, from April 2019. All right, so first off, is that a hot dog? And why not? Nothing has changed except for the shape of it. All right, so moving on. This is a menu from Steak and Shake. I know it's a fan favorite amongst my students. So Steak and Shake, based on the Steak and Shake menu, does this support your assertion or reject or go against your assertion? Obviously this is supportive of a hot dog is not a sandwich. Okay. However, this actually came up in class today. One of the students pointed out an issue that makes the reliability of this evidence a little more questionable. The fact that chicken fingers are categorized as a sandwich in here makes this appear to be less valid than what it otherwise would have been. All right, so why are chicken fingers under the category of sandwiches, thus making this entire document not reliable? Interesting. The cube rule of food. All right, so I guess since I've talked about burritos, I guess a burrito is a type of calzone. So this is simply looking at the carbohydrates, right? Where the starch, I guess, where the starch are located. So under this definition, a traditional hot dog is a taco. All right. And keep in mind what sushi is here. Let me just kind of show you an image. So this is from when my daughters we went on vacation. So does that mean that they were eating sushi based on the location of the starch? Okay. All right. So what are we doing here with this? Right. We're analyzing sources. We're developing interpretations. Right. So there's but it is a very fundamental activity that we really need to grasp. So let's do a more serious example. Right. So you may have in your development of your claim, you may have inadvertently used a historical reasoning skill. Right. So historical reasoning. I like the better one. It's called thinking skill. Right. Historical reasoning skill, right, must be used. Right. Must be applied. Okay. And we only really use one side of a skill per claim or assertion or whatever. So what does that mean? That means we've got things like CCOT, right? So that means I'm either going to be talking about continuity or I'm going to be talking about change. In my sentence, I won't talk about both. I won't say a continuity in change, et cetera, right, in a sentence. I'm going to choose one. I'm not going to talk about the other in that sentence. So, but we need to see skill application. Now, do you have to use the word change? No, you do not need to actually explicitly use the word change. You can use a word that means something to the effect of change. All right, so you also, right, you need a category of analysis. Right, and this is like the meat of it right here. Right, this is the meat of it, which is why I sometimes call your thesis a category of analysis. And a category of analysis falls under the category of a theme, but one level of specificity below. One level of specificity below a theme. So what does that mean? That means, let's just kind of say, we've got 6 theme words in this, for this course, and I'm going to go through them in just a second with you. So let's just say, governance, right? Governance or political, right? That is a theme word. I'll never use the word government or governance in a thesis. I'll never use the word economic in a thesis. Okay. But I might break that down one level of specificity below, right? So somewhere right here, right? Somewhere right here. So that also is not a fact. So somewhere between the theme words and a specific fact, there's a middle ground. And that is where your categories of analysis live. All right. So I'm going to show you what that means. All right, I'm going to show you what that means. All right. So these are our skill words. All right. So let's start with a real prompt, or a kind of a more realistic prompt. And then I'll kind of show you what I mean by that category of analysis. So here we have this. All right. So this first little blurb, we often see this with LEQs, DBQs, I guess, increasingly. So we're looking for, we have a time period, 1200 BCE to 1200 CE. Different factors led to the emergence and spread of new religions, such as Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Christianity, Islam. Develop an argument. So this is the actual prompt. This is the meat. This is what you need to answer. Develop an argument that evaluates how such factors led to the emergence or spread of one or more religions in this time period. Okay, so that's the meat of it. That's what you really need to be doing. So the question is which skill are you going to apply here? All right, which skill are you going to apply here? There are certain keywords that you can use that will kind of help guide you. Okay, so based on this, led to the emergence or spread, led to the emergence or spread, led to kind of means causation, right? Spread is causation, right? So you kind of see that the prompt is kind of guiding you towards a specific skill, all right? Can you use similarities, right? Can you use comparison as a way to answer the question? Technically, the answer is yes. All right. However, there are some reasoning processes that simply make more sense. And because this is asking for factors that led to the emergence or spread, okay, notice here it's not talking about religion, right? And it's pushing you towards causation. All right. So keep that in mind. It's pushing you towards a specific skill application. Now, when we talk about thematic categories of analysis, doesn't have to be culture, okay? Because it's not asking you about religion necessarily. It's asking how religion spread, all right? So there is a difference here, all right? So that all being said, I want to answer this question. I want to go one level of specificity below the themes. So I'm going to go through the themes. These would be one level of specificity below the theme that let's call this a little menu you can choose from. And I'm going to do this for the six themes of the course. So these are the 6 themes of the course: political, economic, human, environment, interaction, culture, social, technology. And then these are categories of analysis that are quasi-relevant. Some are less than others, but are relevant to what the prompt is asking. And so if I were to create a claim on this, then these would be my categories of analysis, where I would then apply my skill application to it. All right. So, one of the ways in which that encouraged Christianity to spread from blank to blank, or that encouraged Buddhism to spread from point A to point B, would be religious tolerance practice in point B. All right. So that would be my category of analysis. All right. So once you've done that, you then can give specific examples of evidence. So the word caravanserai here is a very specific piece of evidence that I would use to support this assertion that transportation networks, right? Transportation networks encouraged the spreads of religion, right? So caravanserai here is a fact, right? Transportation network in this case is my one level of specificity below political. All right. And you can do this for all of these. All right. So feel free to pause and look at this. All right. All right. So depending upon which categories of analysis you chose, all right, you may want to structure your thesis accordingly. All right. So feel free to pause and go through this. These are just examples. All right, and then based on that example of an assertion, these are some different ways in which you could support those assertions, right? Those categories of analysis with specific evidence. All right, so just kind of threw this together. All right, so feel free to pause and read through if you want. All right, so bottom line, use whatever reasoning process you think is best. Don't worry whether it's the right reasoning process. Right? You need to go with what you are comfortable with. That is all for today. Sapriati.